So in the last lecture, we have discussed about our how we are going to create an object. Okay. So we have discussed about what is an object, what is a class, and how to create an object and why we are creating an object. Okay. And then later on, we have gone through what are the basic stages, or you can call it as the life cycle of an object. That first we will create an object, then we generally access that object. If we are not accessing that object, then we have a garbage collector. And the uses of garbage collector is that if you are not going to access that particular object, so it is going to delete that object from your memory, and objects are always stored in your heap memory. Okay. So now in this today's lecture, what we are going to learn about is about the variables in Java and your methods. Okay. So till now you already have an idea about what variables are. Okay. So variables are basically the names. Okay. So like where we are using. So we generally used variables where whenever we are creating your what you're using some data types. So we have used variables whenever we are writing int I is equals to this thing, then this I is what your variable. Okay. But in Java, if we are going to categorize the variables, okay, so where we are generally where we used to assign some values, then variables are basically categorized into your three categories. First one is your local variable, second one is your instance variable, and third one is your static variable. Okay. Even though, although I have already told you about what are our local variables, what instance variables are. Okay. So instance variables are basically related with an object. Okay. And static variable, what static variables are? Static variables are those variables which are basically directly related with your class. And what about local variables? Local variables are those variables which are basically within some block of code. Okay, block of code. So I'm going to show you the example so that we will go one by one, and then we will try to understand what are these variables, because this is very important concept. Okay, otherwise later on whenever you are going to write or build your own application, and if you have no idea and you are not able to differentiate between these variables, then every time you will get your wrong answer. Okay, so let's start with our local variables. So by the name, local means that the scope of that particular is limited to that particular block. Okay, so first we will go through what the definition of your local variable. So a variable defined within a block, okay, or method or constructor is called your local variable. So generally, if we have a block of a code, and in that block of a code, we have basically declare one your variable. Okay, that variable is known as what your local variable. So like in your current labs, okay. So in the labs, whatever the variables you are using it, always keep in your mind that those variables are your local variables. Okay, why those variables are your local variables? Because those variables you are defining in your public static void main method. So if I'm going to write in the public static void main method int I over there, so what this I is, this I is my local variable. Okay, why this is a local variable? Because this variable is within a block or method or constructor. So here in this case, it is inside my method. Okay, so if I want to access this variable outside this method, so I won't be able to access this variable. So always keep in your mind. Okay, so whenever you are using or defining any local variable, so 2 points which you have to keep in your mind. First is that the initialization of local variables is mandatory. Okay, so as you already know that we have some default values for integer, we have 0, for float, we have what 0.0. These are what our by default values, but these default values are not applicable with your local variables. Always keep in your mind. Okay, so it is mandatory that whenever you are basically declaring any variable, then you have to initialize the value of that particular variable. So if you are not going to initialize it, then what will happen? You will get an error. Okay, And what error you will get? You will get a compile time error. Okay. And the second point, which is very important, is that the scope of these variables exists only within the block in which the variable is declared. So as I told you that if I am going to access this variable outside this public static void main method, then what will happen? I will get an error. So I cannot access this variable. So the scope of this variable is limited with our public static void main method. It means I can use it only inside this your public static void main block. After that, later on, I won't be able to basically access this variable. Okay. So these are the most important property of our local variables. So let's take two examples. So using this example, you will be able to understand what I am basically telling you about local variables. So here in this case, what I have done, I have created a class and I am having a public static void main method, which you already know about, that we have a default method and it is mandatory that whenever we are creating a program, then our class should contain a public static void main method. If our class is not containing a public static void main method in that particular program, then we will get an error. Okay. Now what I have done over there, I have initialized a variable int a, just like that. Okay, just I have declared a variable I of which data type? Your integer data type. And now I want to print the value of a. So what I told you, first of all, just check whether it is a local variable or not. So yes, it is a local variable. Now, how can you say that this is a local variable? Because this variable I have defined inside this block of code. So whenever you will see these curly braces, okay, so these are what your block of code. So whatever the thing you are going to define, whatever the variable you are going to define in these two curly braces, either you are using constructor. So later on I will tell you what constructor is actually. Even I have just given you a basic idea what constructors are. Constructors are basically used to initialize the value of that particular variable. Okay, but right now we are using a method. So inside this method we have these curly braces, and what I'm doing, I'm just initializing a variable. So now once I have declare a variable and I haven't initialized any value, so if I'm going to execute this program, then I will get an error, and the error which I will get over there is, see, a variable a, this is the name of my variable a, might not have been initialized. Why? Because this is a local variable and it is mandatory for you to initialize a variable before using it. Okay, so what does it mean? If I am going to execute this program, then I will not get any error. But whenever you are using this variable, so in this line I am using this variable. So if I am using this variable, so it is mandatory for me to initialize some value before using it. Okay, so that is why I will get an error. So the solution of this thing is that whenever you are declaring any local variable, or then you have to initialize some value. So right now I have initialized it int a equals to 10, and if I'm going to execute this program, then I will get the output what 10 in the value. Why? Because I am printing the value of a over there, and the value of a is what, your 10. Now, so similarly, what one more constraint I told you about, the scope of your block. Okay, so here in this case, let's take what I have done. I have created a local variable. Okay, now where is my local variable? Here is my local variable. But see where this, what is the scope of this local variable? This local variable I have initialized or declared where? Inside this block of code. Okay, it means that I cannot access this variable outside this loop. And after this, what I am doing it, I am printing the value of a. Now what I told you, that for a local variable, scope is very important. It means that you cannot basically access that particular variable, local variable, outside the scope. But here I am accessing this variable outside the scope. How? Because see, I have opened curly braces, I have initialized the value of that particular variable, then I have closed it. and outside this what I am doing it, I am printing the value of a. So if I'm going to execute this code, then I will get an error, and the error which I will get over there is what? Cannot find the symbol. Okay, what error I will get? I will get cannot find symbol. Why I am getting this error cannot find symbol? Because the scope of this variable is limited with this block of code. Outside this, our compiler will say, what is a? I don't know what is a. What do you mean by a? Because the scope of this variable is limited to only inside this loop. So if I have written this system.out.println inside this your if block of code, then it will work fine. Okay, so we will not get any error. But outside this loop, if I'm going to write it down any statement like that, I will get an error. Okay, so two constraints which are very important with respect to local variables. First, how to identify whether it is a local variable. So local variables are always written in your block of code. Either you are using in your for loop, either you are using in your if statement like this, or inside your method, inside your constructor, and so on like that. Okay, so if we have any block of code and if we are initializing some variable, so we have to initialize some value. And second point is that we cannot access this particular variable outside that particular scope. Now, the second variable we have is your instance variable. And this variable we have already discussed in our last lecture where we have created an object. Okay, so instance variable, always remember, okay, because these points are very important. So these variables are going to be accessed by objects only. Okay, so you cannot directly access the instance variable. Okay, so if you have in a program, if some variables are instance variables, if you want to access those variables, then it is mandatory for you to create an object, okay, for that particular class, and then just because of that you are able to access those variables. Otherwise you will get an error. Now, so let's go through the definition. So instance variable are non-static variable. Why? Because we already have one static variables too. Okay. So I am going to tell you about what static variables also, but first go for non-instance variable. So instance variables are non-static variables and are declared in a class. Always remember where we are declaring an instance variable inside a class, but outside any method, constructor, or block. So it's not like that we are basically declaring these instance variable anywhere else. No, we cannot declare these variables anywhere. We can declare these variables only outside your method, constructors, or your block. So it should not. So if you are going to declare any variable inside method or constructor or block, then it will become your local variables. But we want to declare instance variables, so instance variables should be declared outside your method, constructor, or your block. Second point, which is very important with respect to your instance variable, is that instance variable will have some default value. Okay, like I told you, for int the default value is what? 0. For your float the value is what? 0.0. For you can say that for string that default value is what? Null. So all these values, if you are not basically initializing any variable, so no, you will not get any error in the case of what your in the case of your instance variable. Okay, so unlike local variables, we may access specify for instance variables. So we can, and one more thing which is very important is that if we can access local variables instance variables anywhere we can want, but the thing is that we can access these variables only with the help of object. Okay, so let's take one more example. So this point is again very important, that instance variable can be accessed only by your creating object. So this point is very important. Okay, so first of all, let's take one example. Now in this program, what I have done, this is my class, these are the variables. Okay, and this is my public static void main, and inside this thing what I am doing, I am printing the value system.out.print. I am printing the value of num1 num2. Now first of all, we have to find out whether these variables are your instance variable or your local variables. What these variables are? So what I told you, according to the definition, local instance variables are those variables which we are going to declare inside your class, which we have declared it, okay, and it should be outside your method, okay, any method, even your main method. So it should not come inside any method or block of code. So are these variables inside any block of code? No, they are not inside any block of code. They are just inside your class, okay. So that is why these variables are known as what your instance variable. Now what I told you, that two things I have told you. First thing is that instance variables are going to be accessed by only or your objects, okay. So you cannot access these variables without object. But here in this program, okay, let's take this program. So here in this program, what we are doing it, are we creating any object? No, we are not creating any object in this program. But are we accessing these variables? Yes, we are accessing these variables. So where we are accessing these variables? In this line, system.out.println. Here what we are doing it, we are accessing these variables, okay. So what I have done, I want to print the value of num, I want to print the value of num1, and I want to print the value of num2. So I am accessing these variables without object. So once I am going to execute this code, then what will happen? I will get an error. Okay. What error I will get? I will get an error, and the error will display a message is that non-static variables, because instance variables are also known as what your non-static variables. Okay. These are basically your global variables, and they are also known as your non-static variables. And see, none cannot be referenced from a static context. Static means basically right now, just think about it. Whenever I'm going to write it down static, static means class. Means directly with the name of class, you cannot access these variables. It means that we required an object. Okay. So the solution, if we want to access these variables, then what I will do, first of all, I am going to create an object. So that is why what I have done, I have created an object of main class, okay. So new, allocate the memory. Main is my constructor, which will initialize the default values of these three variables, okay. And then this is just a reference variable. Obj is a reference variable. So what will happen in the heap memory, location will be allocated for obj, let's assume, and then in this obj I will have num, I will have num1, and I will have what, num2 over there. Okay. So for num, because I haven't initialized any value, so it will assign default value of integer, that is 0. Similarly num1, but here we have initialized the value of your this variable, so that is why we will get 10 over there. So if we have assigned initialized some value, no need to worry, it will take that particular value. But if we haven't assigned any value, then automatically it will take the by default value. So for float, it will take 0 0.0. Okay. So now this is an object, and this obj is holding the address. Okay. I have shown you in the last lecture that if we are going to print obj, then we will get the address. Okay. The basically hash value for that particular memory address of that particular object. Now, as I told you in the last class, is that how to access the value of that particular object. So we will use this reference variable obj, and we will use this dot operator, and then we are going to write num over there. So if I'm going to write obj.num, then how my compiler or JVM will execute? It will go obj, and in obj it will check for what your num. So the value of num is what? 0. Then it will again go obj, then it will go for num1. The value of num1 is 10. And what is the obj dot num2? The value is 0 0.0. So that is why if we are going to execute this code, so the output which we will get over there is 0, 10, and 0 0.0. So in the case of instance variable, two things we have understood so far. one thing is that how can we say that find out whether it is an instance variable or not. So instance variables are basically your global or non-static variables which we generally initialized or basically declare outside your methods, okay, outside your methods class. So it should not within some block of code, okay, otherwise they will become what your local variables, and but it should be inside some class like that, okay. So this is all about your instance variable. Now the third category is our static variables. Now, what static variables are? So static variables are generally known as your class variables, okay. So whenever we are going to use static keyword, okay, so right now later on when we are going to cover access modifier, then I am going to tell you about the actual your functionality of static keyword. But right now just think about it, whenever I am going to write static, then it is basically known as what your class, related to your class, okay, and instance are related to your objects, okay. So look, see, so unlike instance variable, we do not have one copy of static variables per class and how many objects we will create. So every time we if in the case of your object, okay, so if I'm going to create one more object, main obj1, okay, and new main, if I'm going to create one more object over here, then what will happen? Again, one more memory will get allocated to this variable again, okay. So I will have num over here, num again over here. So if I'm going to create 10 objects, then 10 memory location I will have, and all these memory locations are independent to each other. But in the case of your static variable, if we are going to assign a variable as a static variable, then in the memory we will have only a single variable, okay, only a single memory location. Even though we are going to access multiple times, we are going to modify that particular memory location. So only one memory location is going to be assigned for that particular static variables. But for instance variable, for each of with respect to each object, they will have a different memory location. Now, similarly, initialization of static variable is again, it's not mandatory, and its default value is here. I have written 0 for int, okay, only for int, long, short, double. For float, default value is what your 0.0. So I'm going to modify this statement, which I have written its default value is 0. So for only for in the case of integer, okay, its value is, default value is 0. Now, if we access a static variable like instance variable, the compiler will show the warning message. It won't halt the program. The compiler will replace the object name to class name automatically. Now let's take one example and we will try to understand what static variables are. So static variables are again a variable which you basically define, okay, outside your main method. So I cannot define it, okay, even though I can define it, okay. So we will discuss about this thing later on, but right now I'm just going to tell you about what static variables are. So static variables, you can see it over there. I have used a keyword that is known as your static. So if I'm going to make a variable as a static, then what I need to do, I need to write a keyword. So if I'm not writing a keyword, then what will happen? I will get an error, okay. So that is why, as I told you, that static variables, and they are basically known as your global variables, okay, global variables. Because see, the scope of these two variables are means inside the entire class. So in any point of view, in any point of time, if we want to access these two variables, so we can access it. But in the case of your local variables, you have some constraint type within only that particular block of code, you can access those variables. So right now you can see it over there. I haven't created any object, but right now I am accessing these variables num and num1. Okay, so what does it mean? It means that your static variables can be accessed by the just directly by your class. Okay, so if you have multiple classes, then you can use that particular class name. Okay, but right now we have only one class. So what we are going to do, if we are going to write num and num1, so we will get the output as what your num is equals to 0 Why we are getting 0? Because even in the case of your static variable, we will get your default value. So we will get the value 0 over there, and for num1 we have already initialized the value, that is 10, so we will get the value 10 over there. So if we are going to execute this code, so the output which we will get over there is 0 and 10. So always remember what static variables are. So static variables are those variables for which we assigned a single memory location. I will tell you in the next lecture what do you mean by single memory location, what are the problems we might face if we make all the variables as your static variables. Okay, so we will make only those variables are static variables where you are going to use that particular variables for entire class. Okay, for the entire class. So that is why these variables are known as your class variables. But for the instance variables, all the variables are related to your object. So if you are modifying the value in one object of that particular variable, so in the next variable, it's not like that it will reflect back. It will not reflect back. But in the case of your static variable, it will reflect back. And the second thing which is very important with respect to your static variable is that we will get what some is your default values. Like here in this case, I haven't initialized the value of num, so that is why I will get the value what 0 over there. Now we have talked about what variables are. Okay, so in a class, as I told you, when we have gone through what class is, so in class what we have data members. So data members are what your attributes. Okay, we have attributes and we have methods. Okay, but we are using a method. So in our entire labs we are using one method, that is your public static void main method. But we don't right now in our entire labs, if you will see over there, we haven't created our own method, but we are using this method. Okay, so now what we are going to do, we are going to discuss about what methods are now. So even though we don't know how to create a method like that, but we have used some existing methods without fully understanding their implementation. So right now, even though we don't have any idea about what methods are, how to create a methods, but still if you will see over there, whenever you are writing your programs in your lab, so somehow indirectly you are using those methods. So for example, the first methods which most of you are using are what your print method. So whenever you are writing system dot out dot print, then what this print is? Print is a method. If you are writing printf, what this? Again, it is a method. Whenever we are writing println, what this println? Again, it is a method. So always remember, somehow indirectly we are using this method. Even though in Java right now, if you discuss about, we don't know how to create a method, how to implement those methods, we have no idea, but somehow indirectly we are using these methods. Similarly, in the strings, if someone have used length, caret, like these things, no, if nobody has used, no issue at all. But I think in the case of your scanner class, we have used these two methods, like your next double, next int, okay, next line. So all these are what your methods. So somehow we are using these methods, like if we have created. So right now in your ATM also, whenever we are basically using or swapping of our cards, so basically what is happening indirectly, we are using these methods. Okay, but we don't have fully understanding their implementation, how they have implemented these methods. Okay, so Java has thousands of methods. So there are already methods that are already available, which we are basically using it. Like in the case of system.out.println, similarly, we are using next double, next int, like that. Okay, so we often need to create our own. Okay, so right now what we are going to do in our program also, we are going to create a method. Now the first question again that comes into your mind is, what is the need of method? Why do we need methods? Okay, so let's take an example in your Java programming language. So in this program, what I have done, I have created a class and I haven't created any method. See, I haven't initialized or declared any method. I am not using any method. Instead of that, what I have done, I have just written int a, int b, and I'm just writing system.out.print, and I'm performing the addition of these two numbers. So if I'm going to say what will be the output of this code, so I'm sure that 100% means more than 90% of the student will give me the correct answer, and the correct answer which they will give me, that we will get an error. Okay, we will get an error. Why we will get an error? Because we are using these variables. Okay, we are basically performing these operations. We are performing some business logic like your addition of two numbers like that, but we are not, we don't have any method. So right now we don't have public static void main method. So that is why we will get a compile time error. So therefore in Java, whenever the business logics are not allowed. So if you want to create a direct, if you want to apply some direct business logics, like if you want to perform some operation, some set of operations, so you can perform those operations only inside some methods. Okay, it's not like that you can perform those logic anywhere you want to perform. No, it's not like that. You can perform only inside some your method. So that is why in Java methods are very important. Okay, without method we will always get an error. So whenever you want some implementation, first of all just create a method, and inside that particular method, just whatever the code you want or business logic you want to write, just write your own logic. Now here in this case, what will happen if I am going to execute this code? See, these two variables are what your instance variable. You already know about these things, okay? These two variables are known as your instance variable if I'm going to ask you about this thing. But here the logic, business logic, which I am applying it, like the addition of two numbers, which I am basically applying it inside this your method, okay? Void add method. So again, if I'm going to ask you about what if I'm going to execute this code, what kind of error I will get. So as I told you that there are two types of errors, your compile time error and your runtime error. Okay, so here in this case we will not get compile time error, while in the earlier case we will get a compile time error. Okay, but here in this case we will not get a compile time error. The reason why we will not get a compile time error, because according to our compiler, whatever the business logic which we have implemented, okay, we have implemented this logic inside some method. So it means that we are basically validating each and every concept, but we will get a runtime error. Why we will get a runtime error? Because I have already told you that whenever you are writing or creating or writing any program of Java, okay, so it is mandatory for you that your program should contain a public static void main method. So if I'm going to execute this code, so I will get a runtime error. So main method not found. This is the error I will get. Okay. So I don't have main method like public static void main. So it is mandatory for you to have a method. But here you will not a compile time error, because this business logic you have used inside some method. Okay. So the reason why I have shown you these two examples is that just to tell you is that the meaning, the basic need of what methods we have in our Java programming language. So if you want some implementation part, so implement only inside your method. If you don't have method, then you will get a compile time error. Okay, like this. Now let's go through methods. So methods are used to write logics of the applications. So methods, a program that provides some functionality. This is a very important. Okay, so methods are sometimes known as your functions. What your functions are, and can be long and can contains many statements. So in a method, like here in this case, I have written only one statement. So if you want to write, you can write 1,000 statements too, like that. Okay. So a method groups a sequence of statement and should provide a well-defined, easy to understand functionality. so that we can in future we can use that particular functionality. For example, in the case of your println. So as I told you that this println is what? Println is a method. So if see, it's quite easy. Now we know that how to use this functionality. Okay. So if we are using a string, so we know that we have to use these double inverted commas. And if you are using variables, so no need to use these double inverted commas like that. Okay. So the functionality is quite simple. So we are right now we are just calling this method, but we don't know how they have implemented that thing. But at the end, what we are getting it, we are getting the output. Okay, whatever the output we have. Now in Java we have again two types of methods. First method is known as your instance method. Second method is known as your static method. So these two methods concept are similar to what we have gone through, your static variable and your instance variable. Okay, so you know that what do you mean by static? What I have told you, static means it will create only a single copy. Okay, it will create a single copy for the entire program. And second thing which is very important, we can access static variable using with the help of class. Now with respect to instance variable can be only accessed by object. You cannot access your instance variable without object. Okay, and second thing which we have learned is that we will have a several multiple copy based on how many objects we are creating, and those copies are independent to each other. Okay, this point is very important which I am telling you. Okay, so note it down, where whatever the statement you will feel like it is very important, just try to note it down in your copy. Okay, like this. So similarly, in our instance method is again it linked with your object creation. So without object creation, we cannot use these methods. Even though we will create those methods, okay, we have some instant method, but if we haven't created, if we are not going to create any objects, so we won't be able to access those methods and can be accessed by object only. Similarly, static method, this methods are basically directly lead with your class loading and can be accessed by only class. So you can directly access these methods with the help of your class. Okay, so these 2 points you have now came to know about. Now what method heading tell us? So how to, first of all, how to, what whenever you are going to create, okay, create your own method. So right now you are not creating your own method. Only in the case of your public static void main, you are writing your own method. Okay. So in that scenario, see, whenever we are writing or creating any method, so right now, like in the case of your public static void main method, so what should be the order? Okay. So if we are, suppose I am going to write one method, that is your public string. Okay, I'm going to tell you what this string is. The name of my method is this one. Okay, like in the public static void main, what is the name of my method? Your main. Main is the name of my method. Okay, like this. And then whatever the arguments I want to pass. So over there, what command line arguments we are passing? String args. Okay, so we are passing an array of your args data type. Okay, sorry, a string data type we are passing it. So like this, here we are basically going to create your own method. So here, what is the method? Where is the method accessible? So first one is going to tell us about the accessibility of that particular method. Okay. So this thing we are going to discuss about later on. No need to worry about what is public, what is private. Right now, just assume it that whenever you are going to write a program, just either if you want to use public keyword. If you don't want to use public, then you can avoid it. So it is not mandatory. Okay. Then this is basically how, what does method evaluate to? So what is the return value you want to pass? Third one is your method name. What is the name of a method? What type of arguments we are passing, like integer? I will tell you about, with the help of example, I am going to explain all these things. Okay. So whenever we are basically dealing with your methods, so we have your 3 parts of a method. Always remember. So these 3 parts are, first one is your method declaration. So it means you are going to declare a method. Okay. You are going to create a method. Now after that, what you will do, you will implement that method. Means you are going to write some logic. So if I'm going to write, tell you about, okay, please create a method for addition of like two numbers. So what you will do, you will create a method add over there, and inside add you want that you should pass two number, int num1, num2, okay, int n2, and what you will do, you will just perform the summation of n1 plus n2, and the result, whatever the result you that we are getting it, you want that it should return that result. So we are going to just write it down, and so it will give me that result. Okay, so this is what we are doing it over there. This is known as your implementation part. First one is your declaration part, and third one is your calling part. Like in the case of system dot out dot println, so over there, what we are doing it, we are actually calling that particular method. Okay, println. That method they have already implemented, but what we are doing it, we are just calling that method. Okay, like this. Now, first thing which we are going to discuss about is method declaration. So a method declaration begins with your method header. Okay, so the header which I have told you, it is mandatory. Okay, so what that your header
Sir, you got hand.
कुछ टाइम के लिए तो मुझे लगा कि
Hello, am I audible?
yes sir, yes
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Yes, sir.
Sir. Yes. Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes,
sorry
sir.
for the inconvenience. I think I'm getting a lot of network issues. So what I'm telling you is that the significance of a method. Okay, so after some time I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so so what I'm just telling you right now is the difference between your instance method and your static method. Okay, so always keep in your mind is that whenever you are going to deal, whenever you want to access a method with the help of a class, okay, you want to access that particular method, like in our case public static void main. So that public static void main is what, that is why we are not creating any method. Okay, so you already know that whenever we are writing public static void main, why we are not getting any error, because that method is your static method. So that method we can directly access with the help of your class. You don't require an object for that. Okay, but in the vice versa case, let's assume if we are going to create a method that is your instance method. So in that scenario, it is mandatory. Okay, it is always mandatory for you to have to you have to create an object for that. So if you are not going to create an object, then what will happen? You will get an error. Okay. So now, just in that scenario, let me just wait. Now I'm facing a lot of network issue. Just wait. Okay, so apart from that, one more thing which I just want to tell you is that how to declare a method. Okay, so as I told you that in your method we have different components. So whenever you are writing, like in the case of public static void main, so as I told you, public and static are what your access modifier. Okay, public and static are what your access modifier, and your void, either you can write void, you can write int, you can write double. So whenever you are writing void over there, it means that your method is not going to return anything. Okay, so like in the case of our public static void main, why we are writing void over there? Because our method is not returning anything like that. Okay, but if we have written public static int main, even though it is invalid in Java, then what does it mean? Now it becomes mandatory for us to basically return some value. Okay, so we have to return some integer value like that. If we are not going to return some integer value, then what will happen? We will get an error. And if we have written if we have suppose created our own method, like your int main, like the addition of two number, for example. Okay, just wait for some time. Now my net is working, so I'm joining from my system. Just wait. Again, sorry for the inconvenience, sorry. Mm. So by the way, right now, if anyone is having any doubt, you can ask me in between. So whenever I'm till now, I'm going to just start my this MS stream on my desktop. Is there anyone who is having any doubt related to this topic? Yes.
Sir, like I'm not able to understand how static variable only has
Yeah. Sorry,
memory
your
assigned.
voice is not audible. Can you speak more loudly? More loud? Yeah.
Sir, I'm not able to understand how static variable has only its memory allocated one at one place.
So I'm just going to tell you about this thing. How you are saying that, now how we are basically allocating a memory space for that. Because see, your static variables are na, related to your class only. Okay, so they are not at all related to anything else. So what we are doing it, because the scope of your static variable are basically confined with your class. So that is why what we are doing it, we generally allocate some memory space. Okay, in a memory, what we are doing it, we directly give some memory space. So whenever we are loading a class, so actually how our compiler executes our code, first it will load our class. So whenever we are loading our code, then at that time automatically our class, okay, let me, so now let me again share my screen. Okay, yeah. So now my screen is visible now. Yeah, can anyone tell me?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So now here in this case, what will happen in the case of your the question which he has asked me about the memory allocation, how memory allocated for the static variables, and it is really very good important question. Okay. So see how memory are basically allocated. So if I have created a class, let's take an example of some static variable over here like this. Yeah. So here in this case, what will happen? A memory space will be allocated for num variable and number variable in our memory. Okay. And here it will assign some value 0 over there. And here it will assign a value 10 over there. Okay. And this basically this memory space can be accessed by only with the uses of your class name only. So only with the name, only with the help of your class name, you can access the value over there. I'm not saying that you cannot use objects. You can use objects too if you want. If I'm going to write like main dot num over there, okay, even in that scenario I will not get any error. But what I mean to say, so that you will understand what is the difference between your this thing and this thing, okay, like here, okay. Now let's take, I have created one more variable that is known as your static variable, and the variable is your var, okay. So this is what my static variable is. Now whenever I am going to create an object over there, okay, whenever I am going to create an object, so this is what we are going to do. So here in this case, how memory gets allocated, let me tell you over there. So first of all, for a static variable, it will automatically allocate a memory for var variable, okay, like this. So whenever you are loading a class now, so automatically at that time in the memory, it will allocate a space for var variable, and then this var variable is related with our main class. Now, after that, see, whenever we are going to int, so right now we are not basically declaring any memory. No memory will be allocated. No memory will be allocated right now. So memory will be allocated for these variables whenever we are going to create an object. So let's assume I am going to create two objects, main.obj12, okay, like this, new main, and then like this. So what will happen whenever I'm going to create two objects? So in the heap memory, we are going to create two objects like this, okay, like this. And in these two objects, we will have these variables only, num1 and num2, okay. Similarly, we will have num1 and your num2. What I mean to say is that suppose if I'm going to write obj dot num is equals to 10, okay, this is very important, okay. And if I'm going to write obj1 dot num is equals to 15, okay, like this. So what will happen in this memory location, obj.num will become 10 and obj.num will become 15, okay. So these are what these two variables are independent to each other. But what do you mean by static variable? So let's take what I will do. If I'm going to write obj, you can access your static variable even with the help of your object name also. You will not get any error, but it is not advisable to use this thing, okay, to use the concept of object. But here in this example, I just want to show you. So here my static variable is what, var, and you know the var value is what, 0. So if I'm going to write obj.var is equals to 10, okay, and if I'm going to write obj1 dot var is equals to 20. So how my code will be executed? First, it will update the value of var as your 10, and then obj1 dot var is equals to 20. So in the single memory location, you are updating the value. But here in this case, see, here we are updating the value for their respective variables like that. Got the point? Or is
Yes,
it
yes,
okay?
yes.
So this is the difference between static and your non-static variable. And this thing is also similar in the case of our methods also. Okay. So like in the methods, as I told you that instance, so we are going to create separate methods for your objects. But in the case of your static method, that method is directly linked with your classes. Okay, like this. So see, here in this case, what we are, whenever we are creating or declaring any method, so see, if we are creating a static method, so if you are not creating a static method, just remove it. Now I have created an instance method. So the difference between static method and instance method is that in a static method, we have a static variable. Okay. So right now in your public static void main, we have a static method. Then we have a return type. So this is mandatory. Okay. To write some this is optional. Optional in the sense, if you are not going to write it, though, then we will consider it as an instance variable. Right now this is a return type, so it should be your integer data type. Okay, or if you don't want to return something, you just write void over there. So if you are not going to write anything, okay, so you will get an error. So it is mandatory. Return type is mandatory whenever you are declaring any method. Then name of the method is mandatory. Then this parameter list is optional. Okay, optional means it depends upon your functionality, whether like in the case of your public static void main, it requires string args, so it is mandatory to basically write it. Otherwise, if you don't want that, sometimes I will show you in some examples where it depends upon the application. Okay, application applicability, but return type is mandatory. You should write void int like that. Okay, so after you have declared a variable, then what you do, you write some body. So you can write whatever the logic, business logic you want to write. Here here this program will tell me about whether num1 is less than or greater than, we are just basically returning the minimum value. So that is why what I have done, I have created a static variable, static method, sorry, of your integer return type, having your minimum, name of the method is minimum, and we are basically calling, passing to, we are taking two numbers, okay, of integer data type. So we have used, so this is a local variable. Always remember, we cannot use the value of this variable outside this thing. Okay, if after this thing, if I'm going to write min value, I will get an error. So this is a local variable. So if I'm going to write num1, so you know that this is a ternary operator, so it will check whatever the value, otherwise I will get num, else I will get num2. So whatever the return value, so it will directly return where we are calling it. Okay, so this is how basically this is known as where we are declare your body of our method. Then the last is our return statement. Okay, so whenever, as I told you, third part is your return statement. So it in expression must conform to the return type. So you should write some return type. Okay, like here in this case, we are writing integer. Okay, so if it is an integer, so it is mandatory to write return min value. So if we have a return type, okay, of integer, if I am not going to write anything over here, so I will get an error. Okay, and the error which we will get over there is missing return type, like this. So it is mandatory for you to return something. But if it is void, then you don't require any return type over there. Okay, like in the case of your public static void main, you are not writing any return value over there. Okay, like this. And last one, which is very important, is your calling a method. So each time of a method is called, the values of the actual arguments is invoked and are assigned to your formal arguments. Okay, so here you can see it over there. We have int num is equals to min 2 3. Okay, so what I am doing is I am calling this method. So my method name, as you can see over there, is min. Okay, so how can I call it? I will call min because I'm taking only two your parameters. So if I'm going to write over there 2 comma, if I will pass only 2 over there, okay, then what will happen? I will get an error. So it is mandatory for we have to again pass that much number of arguments only. Okay, and it should be of your integer data type. Now after that we will call it, and based on that we can directly call this method and we will get our output. Okay, so in the next lecture what we are going to do, we are going to discuss about instance method. So we will try to cover our entire method concept. Okay, even I am going to upload these ppts too, and then we are going to discuss about method overloading. Then we will go for our constructor and so on, like that. Is there anyone who is having any doubt? Otherwise, I'm going to end our today's lecture. Yes, any questions so far?
No, sir.
Okay. So I think all of you have already got an email. Okay, that there will be your first quiz test, and you know that we have already mentioned everything. Okay, everything means we have already mentioned about your the syllabus also. That what will be the syllabus of your this thing, your quiz. Okay, like this. So any doubt related to anything, just you can directly ask me. Or shall we end this? your session. Basically, are you able to understand now what objects are, why we are creating an object, what are static? See, that
Yes.
is why I'm taking a lot of time, okay? Because I want that you should know, you should not only know about, okay, these are the concepts, okay, method, we will directly create an object. No, if you are creating an object, why you are calling it, how can you call it, and how in machine, basically, we are storing those values, because it is very important. Otherwise you will get, so every time whenever you are going to execute a code, you will get different output, okay, and you don't know the reason why we are getting a different output. So I don't want that thing, okay.